Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'd like to thank you for attending. Today the topic is about racism, and in all honesty, we should have been at the forefront of addressing the issue of racism as Muslims, but unfortunately those who have been forced upon us in the community, those state-sponsored or created two-bit Uncle Tom scholars have chosen to side with the system and give strength to a system that has been built upon racism. Now, do Black Lives Matter? The truth of the matter is no, they don't. The system, when it looked into the issue of giving African Americans freedom, it looked at it in terms of policy. So discussions took place as to whether to give them freedom in order to benefit their global standing. Others looked at it in terms of economics and the benefits that can be derived from creating a consumer class from slaves. Others said that the African American is not capable of providing himself with security. He is no more than a grown child, and therefore slavery is the best thing for him in order to prevent him from harming himself. So when freedom was granted to the African American, it was given to him by his slave master. And it was given to him on the condition that he still remain under their grip. So he was to remain subjugated. And freedom was not freedom in the real sense. If anything, they were restricted in every single aspect of their life, from the food that they ate, the music that they listened to, the neighborhoods that they lived, the clothes that they wore, and so on and so forth. So the African American has never obtained freedom. If anything, when we listen to the music that is common or that is associated with the African American culture, we find it to be the most destructive. When we look at their tastes, we find them to be the most expensive. And of course, this is all part of a design to keep them enslaved. So when we look at what has happened to the African American, we need to understand one thing, is that their freedom, if it was intended, was a second thought. Okay? They never considered freedom to be something that was intrinsic to their value system, to their beliefs. It was something that if it were a thought, it was a second thought, it was given to them after a lengthy discussion as to how to go about ensuring that they themselves would not come back and harm them. And now when we look at the African American community, we find them in the most destructive of communities, crime infested. They compose the largest portion of prisoners. And this is not by coincidence. There is nothing that states that your skin color is going to lead you towards a destructive cycle. This was all intentional. And I'm sorry that this voice is drowned out by those who praise the system and advocate that Black Lives Matter. If we look back in the 50s and 60s, when we look at the African American community, the discussions that were taking place were largely about political philosophy, how to go about educating and benefiting and uplifting the Black community. And now you fast forward 50 years later, and you find that all they're concerned with is mattering, being considered equal. So whatever agenda that they had was destroyed. And in all honesty, the African American community is done. They have no leadership, they have no political agenda, other than trying to gain acceptance. And that is sad, and that is a sad reality. A lot of them were fooled into thinking that a Black man in office is going to somehow benefit them. And boy, was that a joke. I think this year alone, 556 African Americans were killed at the hands of police. And the only time we hear of Blacks standing out and saying something is when one of them gets shot for resisting arrest. Well, you know what? What is more concerning is the way that they're living. That in itself should be a cause for many of them to get out to the streets. Now, if we look back to the history of the African Americans, we find that their call for justice has always led them to the doorsteps of Islam. We look at Malcolm X, or H. Rap Brown, Al-Hajj, Jamil Al-Amin, or Imam Luqman, who I'm familiar with from in Detroit, who either have been killed or incarcerated. For what? For the same exact reason that we see a lot of these young teenagers being shot down by the police for resisting. But it's a different type of resistance. It's a political resistance. It's one in which they want to have a voice that they believe will have a true impact on the future of black lives. One under the shade of Islam. One in which they present Islam to humanity as being capable of giving them that which capitalism has stolen from them. Because historically, capitalism has viewed blacks in terms of profit. They are no more than a commodity, and they still are nothing more than a commodity. This is the sad reality. Brothers and sisters, everything from your taste in music, to food, to your clothes, and so on and so forth, have been given to you in order to keep you within the grips of this capitalist system. All your leadership has been bought out. And we Muslims don't have a way to communicate directly with you because there are too many obstacles in our way. And those who have been forced upon us are just as much your enemy as the system is. And when we talk about Islam, we are not talking about Islam in the terms of color. Color means nothing to a Muslim. The color of your skin is just as significant as the color of my shirt. Many Muslims will come and say, oh, look at Bilal, the example of Bilal. There's nothing in Islam that said that the Prophet ﷺ had a political agenda targeted towards blacks or whites or reds. That's not the case. Whereas when we sit there and listen to these politicians talking, we hear them mention the black voter, the Asian voter, the white voter, and so on and so forth. Because the system is built upon division and segregation. There is nothing in Islam that said, oh Muhammad, go to the black man over there named Bilal and try to gain him to your side. All he did was convey the truth, and whoever came, came. Color had absolutely no significance. This is how Islam addressed humanity, as one. And so long as we sit there and focus on color, so long as there's a system that allows for color to have any significance, any say in your political lives, then that system will continue to destroy you because it was built upon a bias. And we have no bias at all. None at all. And I end with this very simple story in order to show you the significance of what it is that I'm talking about. During the migration to this newly established state, the Prophet ﷺ, our Prophet Muhammad, stood on the outskirts of Medina. And they asked him, who are you waiting for? And he said, my mother. Now keep in mind, the Prophet's mother passed away when he was 4 years old. And they're like, your mother? He's like, yes, my mother, Ayman. And had it not been for the fact that we document the lineage of all of the companions of the Prophet, we would have not known that she was an Abyssinian slave, a black woman that he was referring to. This was a genuine expression of love. It was the Prophet ﷺ showing us that we are human beings, caring for one another, and that color had absolutely no significance. So my dear brothers and sisters, and specifically those from African American backgrounds, we need to understand that look past this whole issue of color, look past this whole African American mindset, and focus on something that will provide humanity with justice while being colorblind, while not mentioning color whatsoever, while looking for the benefit of humanity. And that can only be found within the folds of Islam. And I thank you for your attendance. And I thank you for giving me this moment to speak from the heart. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.